I'm defenseless against that kind of female insanity.
Welcome to the Postgame. I'm Michael Brooks. Welcome to all patrons, new patrons. Welcome to the whole team. Welcome to Harvey, JK, and Daniel Bessner, the clash of the historical titans. It was getting pretty heated here during the postgame. David was trying to break them up and then managed to knock a camera out of place. But it's not your fault. You were trying
Just
to
tell
split
David
these
I know
guys
Wolf
up.
too, and he better watch out.
Whoa. Shit.
You're saying you got my back?
I got your back.
Oh,
actually,
wow.
yes,
God
I got your
damn.
back.
Now it's getting really serious.
Sometime it'd be fun to be on. Richard and I never met. Yeah, we've never
That
met.
shocks me. I feel like you've met everybody. You've met a lot of people.
I have met everybody.
Yeah.
I finally met Daniel Bessner.
Well, that was the one that we were all waiting on.
Yeah.
Let's start. We got a bunch to get to, guys. Let's start, though, on the phones. You're calling from, I believe it is Skype. Are you calling from Skype? Are you there?
Hey.
Hello?
Is that me? Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's you.
It's you. You're on.
Is he breaking up?
I don't know. I don't hear him.
This is Gabriel.
Hey, Gabriel,
you guys
what's
hear
on
me?
your... Yeah, we can hear you. What's on your mind?
I'm calling from Rio. I know you guys have a guy who calls in who's the Brazilian in New Jersey, so I guess I could be the New Yorker in Brazil.
Fabulous.
Nice.
Great.
Cool. What's on your mind?
Obviously, it's been a tough, been a heavy day on perspective from here, but I wanted to ask a bigger question of you guys, which is about the kind of the shuffling of the global political organization that will happen as we start to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. And, just looking from a Latin American perspective, a lot of the successes of the Pink Tide government were kind of buoyed by fossil fuel prices in that era.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And,
Yep.
I think we have to start to look at new directions, new ways of, organizing ourselves and looking at how the origins of the, these political projects manifest themselves vis-a-vis, the economic power that one might have.
I think that's a great... I mean, I'll just say really quickly before I throw it open. It's like, on one hand, there is a very conventional critique of the Pink Tide. And one broad critique is that all of these projects, including, we should also remind, some of them are still ongoing. So, like, I think we have to have a lot of solidarity with Evo Morales as an example. He's actually accomplishing some very important things in Bolivia, and he still runs the country. But there's been two standard critiques of the Pink Tide, and one has been that they're tied to what you're talking about, basically commodity exports, and there's a commodity boom in a certain historical phase, and they're able to use the excess to fund ameliorating inequality in Latin America, right? And when you get to a place like Ecuador, it seriously adds complications because Correa is doing some really good things, but he's also totally overriding indigenous people in the process of exploring for oil, and that's a very serious internal contradiction. And then there's the other, like, one that honestly is like true, but it's way more generic, which is like, oh, well, these places didn't activate their social bases. And first of all, that's a bit of a weird, that's also maybe in some places, yes, but, certainly not in Venezuela as an example. And I know that in Brazil, it's a very standard critique of the Workers' Party, but I know that if you talk to anybody in the Workers' Party, they don't accept that critique. Now, sure, maybe they wouldn't, but like that at least needs to be registered in the conversation before it becomes total conventional wisdom. So, I mean, my answer is on one hand, those critiques annoy me because I think that historically all of these governments did what was in fact historically possible in their moment. So maybe I have a somewhat New Deal style defense of the Pink Tide. I think a lot of the critiques of them are asking them to like jump to totally different historical and geostrategic circumstances. Now, here's the dialectic of that. It's also totally true that one of the reasons they've been able to be reversed is because they relied on commodities exports and because they didn't undermine traditional power dynamics in these countries, which have reasserted themselves primarily with U.S. support. I mean, that really can never be negated. There's other an element of like the Bush administration kind of being like, yeah, we're trying to pretty much totally destroy the Middle East, so I guess you guys can kind of do this, and we'll still try to do some coups and undermine you, but that isn't where they were focused on. And really, by the time you frankly got to the Obama administration, and it's a major mark against the Obama administration, they were active in reversing all of these governments, including the most conciliatory ones. So I think you're right, but I also think, you know, let's really historicize what was possible for these governments. And, you know, that's my only kind of response.
Well, I'm not...
Sorry?
I'm not trying to criticize.
No, I know you. No, I know you're not.
Maybe I didn't. I'm talking about in the future. We have to start to, as we both, you know, start to look from an international left perspective about what is possible, and we start to wean ourselves off of possible because we're just not going to survive as a species and a planet.
Totally.
We have to also accept that there's going to be a huge, you know, reshuffling of the geopolitical order. I mean, I'm asking this from a Latin American perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Sure.
Yeah,
and if I could just quickly jump in, I mean, so I think clearly if you actually start doing some sort of massive Manhattan type project in order to invest in renewable energy, one of the first things you'd see in U.S. foreign policy is a retrenchment from the Middle East, which would, of course, reshape global politics there. I think, for example, in the cases of Israel and Saudi Arabia, I don't think it's really useful to think of them as independent nation states, but rather to think of them as imperial outposts with some degree of autonomy on certain issues and less on others. So I think you'd have a total reshuffling of power in the Middle East. But in terms of Latin America, which is where you are, and Rio is an awesome city, even though that Jair Bolsonaro is a true fascist and horrible person. It's a cool place to be. I think what you'd see is you'd have to have domestic political movements, not only within Latin America, but also within the United States, to try to rechange the hierarchical relationship that has existed between the global North and the global South from the beginning of colonialism. Because as you're probably aware, the United States has been instrumental in making essentially monoculture crops, making these Latin American economies be dependent on monoculture crops for hundreds of years of both direct and indirect control of their economies through things like dollar diplomacy and through direct military intervention. So the question that both the American public on one hand would have to stop that by defunding its ridiculously funded military, which is, you know, able to do whatever it wants in the world for a variety of reasons, but then also Latin American publics would themselves have to mobilize and basically create a new form of political economy that isn't organized around the sorts of resources that led to the so-called resource curse. And something that I think that we on the left don't talk enough about, personally, and this is a little bit of a hobby, of course, is sort of rethinking the consumption-based capitalism that we have, and ensure that we don't have a consumption-based socialism. So basically developing ways to actually live with your environment in a sustainable way, in the sense that we don't, for example, always have access to bananas, right? It might be unsustainable literally to have bananas every day of the year, right? So I think that what we
if you're like me and Harvey and you fucking work out, bro,
yeah,
you know that it's pretty important for muscle recovery. So.
Not to mention the blueberries.
Yeah, so maybe you should think of another example.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to offend.
No,
yeah.
And in fact, in that vein, let me just add that
really quick, if you haven't yet, listen to the Illicit History with Tom and Anisha John on the Caribbean debt cycle. And that exactly, I mean, her research is brilliant and echoes what Daniel's saying. Yes, please.
No, I was just going to say that I don't disagree at all with Daniel, but I would add that it begins with British imperialism in Brazil, Argentina, and, you know, Southern Cone.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not exactly like ours alone. Okay.
Not at all.
I mean, life is more complex.
The North Atlantic, I would say.
Good, well put. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that there's barely a political community of the North Atlantic that's responsible.
Can I tell a quick story? Back when I was in grad school in the early to mid 70s, and I was at Louisiana State University, and I was in an agrarian development course, and a friend of mine in the course who was an Americanist, I actually was a Latin Americanist at that time, looked over to me and he said, you know, everything you're saying tells me that it's really not up to the Latin Americans. It really is, if given the structures of power, it's really up to us.
Yep.
And so one of you said, yeah, I think you were just saying, you know, that it's up to us, really. to liberate ourselves from this in order to allow other liberations to occur. It's a simple way of putting it, but I remember that moment.
And Leo Panitch makes that argument that I think we need to be really, really clear the fact that the United States, the way I put it, it's the sun of in this solar system of geopolitics. So that even if these individual countries have their own trajectories, they're still going along to the gravitational pull of the United States. So this is why I don't think you could really separate the domestic from the international, because a United States citizen is imbricated and embedded in the international in a way that other people aren't.
Well, that's not only true, and I also just want to say too, I just want to echo, like, and this is where the Bernie thing, I'll just, we don't have to get into a whole Bernie track tonight, but like, and again, I disaggregate. There's legitimate criticisms of Bernie, and we can have a debate and blah blah blah. That's great, whatever, fine. I mean, I don't mean to sound
apologizing.
I don't mean to
Tell
sound.
us what you want to say.
I'll tell you exactly what I want to say. If you talk to anybody outside of the United States, Brazil, South Africa, particularly in the southern zone, they will, and with zero illusions about our foreign policy, and they most likely know Bernie's record on foreign policy better than you do, as they do most American politicians' foreign policy better than you do. They will say the simple election of Bernie Sanders to office with what he represents would be the biggest help you could give us for, as an example, freeing Lula, dealing with Bolsonaro, and anything else. It won't be the end of anything. It's a massive gargantuan struggle here and everywhere else. Everybody knows that. But they don't for a second undermine or undervalue the idea of a presidential candidate and a possible president who talks about things like global oligarchy and other systemic injustices.
The freeing of Lula would be historic.
Right.
It would have an impact that was historic, and not unlike Mandela. It's that kind of thing.
I think it is. I actually don't think it's at all. I think there's obvious differences, but if you want to take it from a perspective, I'm into taking people's words for it, and if you talk to people who represent, the impoverished, as an example, or people of color in Brazil. I mean, yes, that's a comparison that's floated around often.
Yeah.
It's not. So I want to just do, Gabriel, thanks a million for the call. Thank you. Let's do this really quickly because we need to have a little bit of fun. Do you guys mind? You mind a little mockery of Dave Rubin? What do you guys think? Can you downgrade your exalted intellect?
Can I just say
for
something?
a couple of minutes? Yes, please.
One of the things that I learn whenever I come to you, when you and I get together,
yes,
and now you, David, and Dan and I,
yes,
is that there are people out there that I hear about, but I couldn't give a shit about.
That's the best Dave Rubin introduction I've ever heard.
The other day, I won't name names. The other day I was on a podcast and somebody said, "Oh, you should go on, you should go on Dave Rubin. He'd love to talk to you."
No, he wouldn't. That's also just not true. Whoever said that is wrong. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
Don't you
I
dare
will.
name it.
I will.
If you use,
I will.
Don't you?
No, don't you ever make a joke about my cell phone again.
Wait.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not going to use the name.
Let me just say that I do fine with conservative talk radio people.
Sure.
But Dave Rubin's not that.
No, Dave Rubin is. Well, Dave Rubin is this. So this is a great clip that Tom Bloke cut for us. And no, actually, I take Professor Kaye's point because particularly the person we're talking about who should not be named is a very smart interlocutor for whom one can have a debate. This is an amazing, hysterical clip. And by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, watch the whole PragerU ad. We get the money. This is Dennis Prager.
Oh, Jesus.
Who is one of the most just sort of like, we decided that Dennis Prager.
Is he still around?
Oh, yeah. He's right there.
Still around and still tax deductible at Prager University.
Yeah, there you go.
It's Prager University?
Prager University. Yep. They make a bunch of dumb YouTube ads.
Does he sell steaks too, like some other people we know?
No, not yet.
That's in the future.
So we've decided that actually Dennis Prager has the bearing of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles victim, and he's sort of a villain. And so he's sort of like, what he is he's a guy who is at a toxic waste company, and he's doing a training to, lie that toxic waste is safe to put in a school, and then the slime gets on him, and he takes on superhuman strength. So this is a very dangerous, disturbing individual here, Dennis Prager. And one of the things he does, he's sitting down with Dave Rubin, who, as I say, there is no greater fusion of stupidity and cravenness that exists on planet Earth. And what's really funny is that increasingly, I mean, Dave's kind of been like as an example, by like saying like, hey, Bolsonaro.
What's your opinion on Brazilian Prime Minister Bolsonaro?
See, it's pretty good. So Dave is, I think, kind of owning a little bit more recently that he's, somewhere on the far extreme right. But this is when he's, still doing this classical liberal thing. And what I love is that this is a clip where Dennis Prager is just showing the ball and including on Prager's own Judaism and probably saying more about their political cohort.
Prager's Jewish? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Both of them.
They're probably saying, definitely Dave Rubin is definitely the dim-witted Jewish kid who got a lot of tutoring to get through his bar mitzvah. But this is them both showing the ball on their political contingent.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal because you're of great use to good values.
Well, don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself.
No. It's like Christians who say to me, we would love you to come to Christ, but you are so valuable to us as a Jew when you defend us Christians. Yeah. And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word. Because America needs people who are clearly liberal and to be honest, and fall into the category of kosher as gay. Yeah. To say, hey, hello, the conservatives are not hate mongers. Hello, they should be heard. And maybe every so often you should read National Review, right, or watch a PragerU video.
These motherfuckers are literally holding cigars. And let me just say, I mean, what I love is that when he says, like, it's so good for the brand that you say you're liberal. It's like these moments. That is what makes Dave fascinating, is when these little tiny cracks go through, and it's not ethical, but it's just like through his immense stupidity. And he kind of is like, it almost sounds like you're saying I don't have any ideas.
Wait, this doesn't actually seem like a compliment.
Yeah, it seems like you're saying that I'm a big dumb vessel for your own propaganda. If you can't say it in front of the whole show, you can't say it to anybody.
I can't.
See? All right.
You already know this, and I'm not telling you.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. All right. I just wanted a little palate cleanser.
You got that too?
Let's go to this is Trump. We're going to do a little bit more of this press conference. This is Trump with Bolsonaro. And again, I think it's really important to frame, roughly speaking, the three trajectories of politics. There's a neoliberal technocratic consensus, which is failing and breaking at the seams, which helps facilitate the rise of this. And then there is a global far-right neo-fascism that these people are choreographing themselves. And then there are emergent movements to both reclaim rightful legacies and generate new possibilities. Yes. I thought you were going to say.
Sorry. No, I'm listening to you. I can't stop. I said to you, I can't not use my.
Oh, right. This is Donald Trump outlining that fascist trajectory with Jair Bolsonaro.
If we don't, the incredible thing is that we can win an election and we have such a stacked deck. And that includes networks, frankly. You look at the networks, you look at the news, you look at the news, you look at the cast. I call it fake news. I'm very proud to hear the president use the term fake news. But you look at what's happening with the networks, you look at what's happening with different shows, and it's hard to believe we win.
That's all
but
he
I'll
looks
tell
at.
you what it really shows. The people are smart. The people get it. They'll go through all of that, whatever it is they're fed, and in the end they pull the right lever. It's a very, very dangerous situation. So I agree. I think something has to be looked at very closely.
Of course, there was a Bolsonaro campaign flooded WhatsApp with lies and fake photos in a completely different level than anything that we saw in the Trump election. Is there one more clip from this to play of Bolsonaro? Or
can I just speak as we're doing this? Go ahead. I think that this press conference, is that what they called it, a press conference? Yeah. I think this was the most revealing press conference that we've seen. The ones with Kim Jong-un and all the others are just bullshit. I mean, they are what they are. This is telling. This is the revealing one, in the wake especially of Trump threatening violence by calling out folks. I mean, he's fucking standing there with a fascist, okay, and embracing him. And I mean, I avoided, at least for a year, ever using the term fascist. I'm pretty sure on Twitter regarding
Remember we
Trump.
had a debate, well, not really, had an interesting, great discussion on the show, and we all, remember at the time, we all agreed on the word barbarism.
Yeah, right.
But I think now we can all just say fascism.
I think that Trump is so to the point where all of the dangerous words we've avoided using, I think that's how far we've gone.
What do you think? Bye.
I think Bolsonaro is a fascist, and I think Trump is a symptom of a very corrupt American system. And I think as you know, what I'm worried about is the diagnosis of fascism in the United States, just because historically liberals have used that to basically enact anti-democratic politics.
Right.
Let me just say that I agree with you in those terms, and I don't think we'll see fascism. Fascism is
right. It's an elastic term.
Okay, and I don't use it merely to shit on him. Okay, I've used every other word available: vile, disgusting, etc. But when he threatened the other day violence, when he warned of his ability to call out police forces, military forces, we're in a whole new zone.
But what about Kent State? I mean, I think there's a deep history of that in the United States, and to otherize it through fascism is what I appreciate the point.
Yeah, this is not Kent State, okay? We're talking Johnson Nixon is not this. We're beyond that. There were still Republican. Wait a minute. There were still Republicans who would not have gone there. I'm going to play the elderly card. I was there kind of stuff. This is on another scale right now, okay?
Rhetorically, certainly.
No, we're on another scale right now. All you have every single day, one last element of the 35 to the early 70s trajectory is being taken out, okay? And moreover, we had mobilized people back in the 60s. We were ready to do things. What have you got right now? We've got a good audience. We're all like a great audience when this stuff happens.
Well, I think so.
There should have been turnout in Washington against the Bolsonaro-Trump meeting.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree with that.
That's what I'm getting at.
I agree. Let's watch one more. I do want to touch on this too, because then we're going to go to this other clip. But I think, Daniel, I'll throw to you on this. I mean, my read has been that Bolsonaro, who is also, like many fascists, a pretty dumb guy, he wants to be totally subservient to Trump. He's quite open to this adventurism, this coup mongering against Venezuela, and the breakers on this process have literally been the Brazilian military and people basically saying, like, look, we actually, we will lose a conflict with Venezuela and we will pay the heaviest price. But here he is with Trump. Check out his tune now.
Trump, regarding the military intervention, do you think about this possibility of fighting Venezuela to remove Maduro from power?
So, as I said, all options are open. I think of all possibilities. All options are open. We'll see what happens. And by the way, I see in the audience the son of the president, who has been fantastic. Would you please stand up? The job you've done during a very tough period of time is just fantastic, and I know your father appreciates it. That I can tell you.
Unbelievable.
Okay,
I wish
thank you
my
very
sons
much.
could be like you. They're total idiots. You actually, they're saying you're connected directly with a cartel that kills other politicians. Why can't I have a son like that? Daniel, what is your read? Actually, you know what? Let's play. I want to throw to you in a second, but let's play this first. Because this is, I won't even say it's extraordinary. This is what you'd expect. This is a former military analyst. Unfortunately, I actually don't have his name in front of me, which is a mistake. But this is a guy who served in special forces in Haiti, Brigadier Anthony Tata. He's author of Dark Winter. This is a guy who has been deployed in a mercenary way. Here he is on Fox News talking about Venezuela.
Secretary Pompeo saying that all of our diplomats have left the country. That's a key indicator and warning that there's a military option in the mix brewing And in my point of view, what we really need to do, this is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. We've also got a nexus between Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah and Cuba there that, you know, they are enemies of our nation. And we've also got the world's largest oil reserves there. So we got a lot of compelling reasons to be there. Mm-hmm. And so we need a sophisticated plan, much like we had in 1994 with the Haiti invasion, where we had a peacekeeping force on an aircraft carrier offshore, and we had the 82nd Airborne Division in the air, and we had Colin Powell, Sam Nunn, and Jimmy Carter meeting with Cedras, the dictator. And it really was brinksmanship up until the 11th hour. And so something of that nature where we can come in and provide humanitarian relief. We've got the armed teeth of the 18th Airborne Corps that is bearing down on Caracas and the very well-known places that Maduro hides out. We can target those pretty surgically. And then we need to protect Guaido, and we need to bring him into power.
He's threatening to assassinate him right there.
Yeah.
I mean, he said it subtly, but this is, I mean, Daniel, take it from here. How does this fit into the traditional coup script? And again, really specifically, he's couching it, but we can target him and we know where he is. What do you think that means?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's difficult to know if they'll go through with it, but I think this is clearly in a long line of Latin American intervention going back at least to 1898 and repeatedly throughout the 20th century. Most famously in 1954 with Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala and the various support for a variety of dictators from Trujillo to Somoza in these various spaces. So this is a long history of American interventionism in Latin America, and I think it's also really important to point out that he creates this fictional power block of Hezbollah and all of these various groups, because basically the United States' security state is very much looking to have a coalition of enemies that it needs to fight in order to justify itself. So you have on one hand this sort of long trajectory of interventionism in Latin America, and on the other hand a continuation of this Cold War logic, which of course after the Cold War was transferred from a fear of communism to a fear of radical terrorism, and which is now being tried to instantiate in this sort of fictional power block, which is something that I want to emphasize, that this guy was associated with Clinton, but this is a meme of the far right. If you look at Michael Flynn, remember the guy who was National Security Advisor for about 3 days, but if you look at his insane book written with Michael Ledeen, he also constructs this sort of power block, right? So I think what you're actually seeing here, it's in some sense a moment of hope for the left, right? Because it's so obviously ridiculous to associate Hezbollah with Maduro, right? This is or with Putin or with all of these groups. So I think you're seeing actually the security state is in a moment of crisis. So we should actually see this sort of half-assed nonsense as an opportunity in order to create a new discursive context where we basically no longer abide this bullshit and this sort of domination of Latin America that has characterized U.S. foreign policy since the late 19th century in a series of misadventures that have resulted in the death and deracination of tens of millions of people. It's fucking disgusting, and we all need to recognize that.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I'll bet money that Bolsonaro's in D.C. with the idea that Brazil will act in our place.
Well, I don't know if they logistically cannot, but if, of course, I mean, look, he went to the CIA headquarters. That is not typical behavior for a visiting head of state.
No, I mean,
and they have
from
been,
my Latin American days, the Brazilian impulse to empire,
the dictatorship,
is deeper, and you know, this is like this great moment. This is really a fascinating moment. I'm really significant. Most Americans will just see it as another moment, but it's not. This is remarkable. Okay, this fits right into everything Bush. Listen to me, that this Trump shithead wants.
Lula Livre, guys. All right, you're calling from a 330 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, it's Ryan from Ohio. How are you doing?
Hey, Ryan, how you doing, man? What's on your minds?
Well, I want to talk about Silicon Valley fascism, actually.
Did you a two-part series with Corey Pine and I for the patrons?
Yes, and more relevant today, I think, than ever before. I don't want to talk about this guy as a candidate, Andrew Yang, I'm speaking of, but because he's obviously a joke. But I want to talk about the ideas that he's like marrying together.
Yeah, we're interested in ideas.
Campaign.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that I mean, you know, his big issue is UBI, but I mean, if you look at the things that he's saying online, especially, he is very much pandering to nationalism, particularly like white nationalism. And I think that
really
this is the future.
We're Yang Gang here.
Yeah, we're Yang Gang, Ryan. So
no, I mean, yeah, talking a lot about
the Yang Bros.
About what?
Are you hopping on the Yang bus tonight, Michael?
No, but actually, Gris can explain.
He's
you
been
say
talking
you
a
know
lot about the white birth rate,
right?
He's been talking about the white birth.
Yeah,
okay, so this is important because he said something 2 weeks ago, which I had no problem with when he said, you know, like a white trucker's suffering is a legitimate category of suffering. I have zero problem. Now, I find any kind of categorization of the working class like that to be weird, but I have no problem with that comment. If he's talking about birth rates, then that, I mean, that is what it is.
And he's also
anybody who's talking about birth rates as anything less than as anything other than lowing infant mortality, you should not trust politically.
Exactly, and because he's framing it in the way because it's like you can't talk about infant mortality generally. You have to abstract. I mean, not abstract. You have to pull out the numbers to look at white. The low levels of white birth rates, which is exactly a
no. I mean, and it's funny because if he's doing that, that's doubly disgusting.
And Richard Spencer's come out in support of him, and a lot of these guys are coming out around.
Well, I know that they
like to do that to joke around.
But. Yeah, I know. Well, right. America is set to become. This is Andrew Yang. America is set to become majority minority by 2045. That's 20 years from now. This will be a truly dangerous time, particularly as we are decimating the most common middle-class jobs, e.g. retail, trucking, driving, etc. Economic stress adds to social polarization and violence. Okay, so yeah, here's the fundamental problem with that as I see it on a number of levels. And I've not I've hung back on Yang, but first of all, even when I was going around with the idea that sure, he's a nice guy with some silly libertarian ideas that will not solve all problems, he has it exactly backwards, right? Which is that he thinks the market is a magical force that just follows its own logic, and it can't be either in a social democratic case radically regulated or brought to scale, or in a socialist case actually absorbed into democracy, right? So there's nothing we can do about it. It's just the logic. That's totally wrong, and that's actually that's just the first departure point. And then if he's going to suggest that there's anything other to do than build a culture that is resilient and strong enough both materially and culturally so that we can have a healthy, vibrant society that is majority minority, then yes, he's playing to racist sentiments. And that's exactly right. It's disgusting. It's wrong. It's analytically weak and playing to the worst sentiments. There's no doubt about it. That is what it is. And I hope that people who have been, I haven't had any interest in him because I'm not interested in, sort of poppy libertarian ideas, but I know some progressives have been sort of giving him a hearing, and this should be it. This
today
right
was I didn't even know who he was until today.
That's a real problem.
I have a Google alert for Thomas Paine, and because of
he quoted Paine.
He quoted Paine because Paine had talked about in agrarian justice the imperative of giving young people grants and older people pensions.
Right.
He said, what is it called?
UBI.
Thank you, UBI. That's his thing,
right?
But he also quoted Milton Friedman to that same effect. So,
well, yeah, I mean, his whole thing. I mean, the whole campaign has been a Trojan horse for libertarianism, which is problematic enough. But now, if this is going to become a Trojan horse for sort of soft white nationalism,
he's running
as a Democrat.
He is,
but if no. I mean, look, this is analytically.
It'd be awesome if he was running as a Republican.
Yeah,
I'd be way more supportive.
I mean, what do you think? What do you think about this Yang phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's typical techno-libertarian nonsense in the same vein as Peter Thiel. I mean,
right.
I feel like we've had these people for a while, and the fact that they haven't been regulated as an industry is a world historical crime. And I think you really need to just totally get. I mean, why does this guy have money? I mean, this is the problem with the modern American politics, is that it allows these nonsense people to accrue such capital that they're able to give a national hearing that we're talking about. This is literally nonsense, and the fact that we have to do this, I think, shows that our political economy is so fucked up that someone like Yang has an unnecessarily loud voice.
And I just want to really underline that, I think in the sort of in somewhat broad ecumenical spirit of this show, I'm going to say everybody from a great revolutionary like Cabral to a great president like FDR to a great leader like Lula to a great activist like Asma Jahangir. One commonality you can identify from Marxist to social democrat to progressive in the way we use it in the vernacular today, is a trust in people and democratic process. And this is so, he's saying the ship has sailed on all of the fundamental decisions that we need to make. That we can just leave to Google and Facebook, and they'll take care. I mean, you know, we'll have driverless cars, which, by the way, things like driverless cars might turn out to be a total bubble and bullshit. I'm not even convinced of that, right? But leaving that aside, we'll let that happen. No problem, no thought, no analysis, no democracy, no regulation. And the answer is to buy off a bunch of people with a social credit. Now, I think UBI is fine if you make it as part of a broader package, but I'm going to actually also attack it from what you might expect to hear from someone on the right, but from the left too, which is like he's totally discounting purpose and meaning. Like, we can maybe dissociate purpose and meaning from wage labor and generate, and that's another amazing thing that the New Deal did. It literally said, you're an artist, you're a builder, here's money to go generate great value in this society. That's one of the things that if you read Harvey's book, I mean, I got emotional reading it. It's extraordinary. And he's not saying that. And even like the meme lords that are following around him, I mean, look, I'd prefer that they be memeing for him than Trump, obviously. And I'm not, and all kidding aside, like, we want to play video games, whatever, that's great. I know I make jokes. But if the top line of your political and social vision is, I get a check transfer to play games and fuck around on the internet, what a totally impoverished view of human capacity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, by the way, on the flip end, will be exploited by a Jordan Peterson, who will Absolutely. At least give you the rhetoric of meaning and purpose, and then funnel it in his own, garbage, far-right, nationalistic way.
Michael, that was, if you didn't mind, a compliment. Please, that was beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But it really, I mean, yeah. Anyways, Ryan. Yeah, please.
I said I didn't want to talk about Andrew Yang, actually.
well, we did.
Too bad.
But,
sorry.
That's fair. But no, the reason I called is because we often talk about the way that like Marine Le Pen style nationalism might come to America, and a lot of people are quick to point the finger at people like Tucker Carlson, and I don't think it'll come, via somebody like Tucker Carlson, who, was born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Right.
It's this Silicon Valley fascism is the way that it's going to arrive, because bribes like UBI, I mean, that's what they are. It's a bribe against class consciousness.
Yep.
Are the way that it's going to arrive. And basically, I mean, and I know the topic is played out as hell by now, and I don't think that MMT and Marxism are at odds whatsoever. But I think that this is like a way that MMT could be used as like a bludgeon against class consciousness. In that tech bros pushing UBI there's no way they're going to push for increased taxes on the rich.
By the way, that's a really good observation. I hadn't thought about. That's really good.
Yeah, I think you're onto it. I think you're on, and what I like about the distinction you're making is, I hate accelerationist arguments, and I hate any argument that's about increasing human suffering to increase class consciousness. I think it's disgusting. And then I think conversely, absolutely. I mean, my Gene Bajlan, who's on the show a lot, I don't read sci-fi, but he gave me an example of a sci-fi novel. The name is escaping me. But it's a dystopia, and it's not called that, but the UBI is part of the dystopia. It's basically like you have a giant excess population, and you're given like basically the bare minimum to live and amuse yourself. And that is the insulation for mass meaningless and injustice. And I think, of course, I mean, these people, some of them are totally extreme and crazy, but there's going to be enough of people from this oligarch class that will think of like, well, God, I mean, what if we just gave them $1,000? Yeah. And the fact that people actually perceive that Yang is like this new dynamic spirit is, I mean, people have just read way too much Fast Company.
Yeah, I'll go on record. UBI, I do not support.
I honestly I don't care. I'm open to any anti-UBI argument. I'm not invested in it at all.
No, I mean, I think it's a lack of imagination. UBI is a lack of imagination. And with all due respect to his quoting of Thomas Paine, Andrew Yang, the fact, I mean, Paine is living in a world in which grants for young people to fight poverty and pensions for the elderly, that's a social democratic pioneering gesture. UBI today is basically to write off people. Number one. But you're absolutely right about purpose and meaning. Moreover, are we really going to believe that we can't, that in some revolutionary fashion, we can't reorganize society so that people do have purpose and meaning, and that, and we redefine the nature of work. Come on. I mean,
it's all it is. It's all, this is actually what your work attests to a lot, right? Like, how do we, and Mark Fisher hits that. I mean, how he is, this is where Zizek is relevant too. I mean, that's just a pure submission to ideological and business consensus. And also, David, coming in a second, but I just also want to say that's another reason why his rhetoric on college is a disaster. You know, look, I'm all for it. I actually think, yes, culturally respecting people in the trades and investing in the trades is actually hugely important. But he talks about college purely as a monetary thing, when the real answer should be, no matter what your profession turns out to be, in addition to being able to get paid well and treated with respect and have power over your own life, every single human being should have 4 years to study without any economic output. Right. That's not the point.
Yeah, and the fact that we have to discuss this, by the way, this is 44 years after the Trilateral Commission. They said value-oriented intellectuals. And here we are all these many years later questioning the value of going to university and spending 2 to 4 or 6 years thinking. Right. I mean, give me a break.
Well, and it's also the university has absolutely been taken over by STEM and skills thinking, right? So like my students, they're all there to get a job. They're not all there to learn, which is a great perversion of what the university is. Because I really think that this again comes back to the centrality of consumption, to the Laban's philosophy, the philosophy of life, of how Americans were raised to live in the world, where consumption is really the center, as opposed to, for example, creativity. I think I want to be careful, which I think a lot of Marxists have done throughout history, which is to fetishize work in and of itself, right? And I think we always have to be, careful about that, because my ideal would be a post-work. I mean, Marx says this, a post-work society where like human creativity and human flourishing is the goal, as opposed to work in and of itself. And I think that should be the goal, and UBI is only relevant in as much as that helps one achieve that or not. That's what I would.
And it's also like,
that's
David,
where contrary.
That's where Marx talks like very specifically, like in the German ideology, right? When he says, like, he points this out very clearly when he says, what, fish in the morning, work a little bit in the afternoon and criticize after dinner.
Without ever being a fisher or worker or criticizer.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like moving away from, being able to participate in the world without having to be your sole occupation. I just wanted to say, it's like, I think that a lot of times we focus so much on, fetishizing work because a lot of people mistake why the working class is so important in Marxism. Mm-hmm. The working class is important because they have an actual ability within capitalism to put pressure on the system. And that's why they're this revolutionary class. And just one more thing is that a person who I look up to as like sort of like my socialist idol is Paul Robeson. Mm-hmm. Who I just found to be an amazing human being, a football star, a singer, a lawyer. And that's the kind of person that, like, when I want to say...
Graduate of Rutgers University.
Yeah, that is true. It's like when I say, it's like, oh, what kind of person do you want socialism to produce? It's like, I want to see Paul Robeson, and Paul Robeson was somebody who was produced through struggle for socialism.
Right, and just to put a fine point on that, philosophically, the role that the proletariat plays in Marx is that the proletariat is the class that recognizes that capitalism is bullshit, and therefore its interests are the universal interest. That is the philosophical role the proletariat plays, not because they're workers, but because they are workers. They recognize that the system is garbage, and they want to transcend it. That is the philosophical position that the proletariat plays in Marx. So I think we just need to recognize.
Do you see the imagination of this conversation and where it goes versus, oh, well, Google's going to do satellite-driven cars, so, let's get you a check.
Can I interject?
I mean, how fucking depressing. I mean, honestly, it's so depressing, and it's so unnecessary. This is like, we don't need to be on the fucking gloomy side of these debates. We are quite literally better than that. There's a lot more that human beings are capable of.
We didn't get
Thanks for the call.
We didn't get Dave Philip Randolph, but if I can say something about Paul Robeson.
Yes, please.
Anyone listening, go onto YouTube, plug in Paul Robeson, Ballad for Americans, period.
Okay, great. We love Paul Robeson. All right, what we're going to do, we'll get to the rest of the sound next week. Let's, actually, what we'll do really quickly, we're going to do a quick gulag, and let's just do the Hitchens on Kissinger, because why not? Because I just want you guys to tee off on Kissinger, because he really is a great monster, and then we'll, I don't know, turn into some type of, Henry Kissinger.
Sorry, it was somebody we both knew.
This is Christopher Hitchens. Again, I don't have time for all the usual caveats of his complicated legacy, blah, 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 blah. He got Kissinger right. So let's play a clip of that.
The defenders say, well, you know, this was American foreign policy at the time, and that he was simply carrying out what was the deemed law of the land or practice of foreign policy at the time. What's your response to that line of defense?
It's been found beyond doubt by minute investigation in Washington that nobody in Congress, which has the power of the purse in these matters and the power to decide, ever knew that the National Security Advisor of President Nixon, Henry Kissinger, had evolved a plan to murder the head of the General Staff in a democratic country, not contiguous to but neighboring the United States, a democracy with which the United States was not at war. No one was ever told of that plan. We know of no authorization for Kissinger to have carried it out.
Let alone the bombing of Cambodia.
The bombing of Cambodia was likewise concealed from Congress. It's flattering to the American people they have to be lied to so much, I sometimes think. And within the administration, since you argue for an indictment of the administration in general, which might be fair, it should be said that the Secretaries of Defense and State, respectively, Melvin Laird and William Rogers, were both very much opposed to the invasion of Cambodia as a violation of neutrality and of international law, and also as of a misreading of what the real causes of the war in Vietnam were. The idea that if only we could clean up a sanctuary or two across the border, the rebellion in South Vietnam would dry up, seemed to them a fantasy. But there was a group of later indicted criminals around Mr. Nixon who felt that this was the only way their boss's reputation could be saved, and by taking their side against the Secretaries of State and Defense, Henry Kissinger tipped the balance.
What about the old argument of moral equivalency, that these are just part and parcel of practices of the Cold War, and that what the communists were doing was every bit as awful and required a counterbalance?
Attacking and killing a democratic, conservative, constitutional officer in a neighboring democracy with which the U.S. is not at war, and a country, by the way, that can threaten nobody, Chile, in collusion with a fascist criminal group, is not anti-communism. It is, in fact, collusion with fascism. But I'd go further and say that I don't greatly care to be lectured on anti-Stalinism by Mao Zedong's best friend, by Leonid Brezhnev's preferred negotiating partner, by the man who told Gerald Ford when he was president that he shouldn't.
All right, yeah, guys, throw it, respond. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you just need a little hitch. He was fun.
He really had a way with words.
He really did.
He is fantastic. I mean, he's 100% right about Kissinger. I mean, Kissinger is sort of it's interesting that he's come down to us as the prototypical realist, because he absolutely did a lot of things that were profoundly unrealistic and really did nothing for the United States, even in his own project. Even if you're going to take his own anti-communist project as serious, which I personally don't, but even if one were to do that, he just harmed his own project. So he's he's a ghoul, and it's insane that Hillary Clinton wanted to cozy up to him, and it's insane that he's been a don amongst the American foreign policy establishment.
My only real question about this,
by the way, I will report, speaking of Hillary Clinton and those likes, on his first day in office, Bill Clinton telephoned Richard Nixon for advice on foreign affairs.
Great. Hey, could you help me? Really well, we're going to get to the Clintons in a second. But
Nixon was very proud about that. Yeah. He wrote it in memoirs because he finally felt included, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You think Bill Clinton was like, maybe he'll feel included that way? Really quickly, though, the only difference between what I do notice with Hitchens, and especially now in retrospect, because of course by the time we were sort of started reading him, he was already pretty much completely off the rails. Right. The way there's a Greg Graydon book on Kissinger, which is great.
Grandin,
excuse me. And Grandin fits him in the history of American foreign policy and the establishment. And Hitchens, even though he was very smart and a Marxist, the book really is like Kissinger's a fucking asshole. And Grandin is like, Kissinger is a fucking asshole who is allowed to operate because of the American foreign policy bureaucracy. And I noticed that in that clip. It was very it was so personalized that might have been another kind of unfortunate legacy of how people talked about these things. As fun as it was and as great as it was. I mean, I like Hitchens' book on the Clintons. I'm not going to lie. I love No One Left to Lie To. He's great.
But then he embraces this sort of anti-Islamic,
right,
incredibly
and Bush
Islamophobic.
And
yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting. You could see how this anti-communism, really, I think for Hitchens, this anti-authoritarianism very easily slipped into an Islamophobia once there was the moment of 9/11. And so I think that's always that was his great downfall, and I think it's going to really seriously harm his, as a historian, his intellectual reputation. The last 15 years of his life is disgraceful.
I'm not so sure it will, because I think the Kurdish question resides heavily in all of that. And I don't want to go there right now, but I think that's the key thing with Hitchens there.
But he was still totally historically and monumentally wrong. I mean, I understand. I get
that. You know.
As Jean Bajlan says, though, he jokes to me. He's like, his dad is a Kurdish doctor in the UK, so he's like the only person left who loves Tony Blair. Just like he fucking juiced money to the National Health Service and fucking killed Saddam Hussein.
And there you go.
That guy's awesome. All
Sorry.
right, we got to get to the Gulag, and then we'll take one more call and a couple of Discord questions. Sorry we can't get to everything, guys. It's action-packed here, as you can know. But next week, Francesca, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, I'm totally spacing your last name. Fuck.
Come on, guys.
Francesca Florentine. She's Al Jazeera Plus, Young Turks. Jesus, I'm sorry. She has a podcast now. She's great, and I literally cannot recall her last name.
He's apologized to you, Francesca.
I am very apologetic. Anyways, but she will be the first block guest, and then it's going to be the crew.
Yeah, Francesca Fiorentini.
Okay. So there we go. So don't worry, we'll catch up on things. But we do have to, of course, do the Gulag. And let me just the Gulag is actually where I do kind of get into Bill Maher mode, because I'm kind of like, okay, and you guys are, you're supposed to kind of be quiet until the open dunking starts. And I'll get to the.
This is sort of TMBS new rules.
This is it. The Gulag is the new rules of our generation. All right, new Gulag. Okay, if you don't want to end up in a labor camp, maybe don't do that. So, here's my question about Chelsea Clinton, and it's a question that could just as easily apply to Don Jr. or Meghan McCain, or any number of other children of America's elite and oligarchs. Why the fuck do I even know who she is? Okay? And there's an obvious answer to that, which is she was a president's daughter, to which I say, fine, c'est la vie. But the second answer to that is that this is a person in their mid-30s who has accomplished nothing of their own merit, who insists on being a part of our national conversation. And once again, if she was providing value and putting points on the board, cool, great, whatever. For a communist, I'm very forgiving and very easy to work with. But what I cannot abide, and I'm not going to play the clip because I'll piss everybody off. Look, she went to a gathering of people to commemorate the victims of the terrorist attack in New Zealand. Should she have been there? Let me piss off the Clinton White Knights. No, she didn't need to be there. She didn't need to be there in a public way. Did the woman who confronted her maybe do it in a way that wasn't perfect? Yes. She's also a fucking college student. And the reaction to her, the reaction to the reaction is the most disturbing thing. Hillary Clinton getting yelled at a little bit by a college student, or Chelsea Clinton getting yelled at a little bit by a college student is okay. She'll live. Everybody will be fine. And what really sticks for me about this is in this discourse of whether or not it was appropriate, or whether or not it was this, or whether or not it was that, is the fact that whatever else you think about that interaction, it obscured the relentless hypocrisy of a Democratic establishment that we echoed in the opening commentary. There's one group of people in politics, and I don't draw an equivalency. It actually matters. It matters when Barack Obama went on television and he said, it's a religion of peace and treat people with respect. But he was also the same person who was waging a global drone war that killed literally an untold amount of civilians because it wasn't reported as a policy design. This is a class of politicians that certainly in New York City and Mike Bloomberg's technocracy spied on Muslims. And this is a place where Actually, speaking of Bill Maher, okay, it's totally fine to speak about Muslim people in a way that is so dehumanizing and essentializing that you could not get it by on other areas, and nor should you. Not even to mention the just ingrained racism and acceptance of perpetual occupation of Palestine. None of the things that Chelsea Clinton has ever spoken about. So that is the context. And if you want to say that the expression of the protest wasn't perfect, you got to give me the first 99.99999% of that statement. And then you could say she could have been better on camera, I guess. And then I'll respond to you, sure, I guess. She's 19 years old. Why the fuck are we even talking about her? This is Kathy Griffin. You think this is bullying? Ha 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 ha. I speak from experience. I can't imagine, you fucking pussy. You can't imagine, you fucking pussy. Wake up. We're all on this planet together. Chelsea Clinton does not deserve this misdirected anger. That's a prominent celebrity attacking a college student.
2.14 million followers.
2.41 million. Confronting a college student for criticizing a child celebrity of politicians who inserted herself in a major news story. And it also brought me back to this. And it's funny because I was on a patron call this weekend with Comrade and Above patrons. You can do those calls with me. And someone asked me about this, and I actually said, I'm not going to talk about this because honestly, I'm not invested in Twitter drama. I'm not really even invested in hating Chelsea. I don't hate Chelsea Clinton. That's not the point. And whatever. We got bigger fish to fry. But then I was reminded of this, that back a couple of weeks ago, when the political hit campaign against Ilhan Omar was starting, and this horrific, disingenuous nonsense from Batia Unger Sargon at the Forward started. Sorry? What did you say?
I said avocado, but I was just...
Avocado, right. Yeah, no, that joke needed to be made. Please learn how to talk about Jews in a non-anti-Semitic way. Sincerely, American Jews. And this grotesque, disingenuous attack on Ilhan Omar. And again, as I always say in this conversation, God only knows, in terms of reality in 2019, the threats that she's facing. Okay? So actually, lying about her and smearing her is a form of incitement. And then Chelsea Clinton comes along. Chelsea Clinton, who had a job at NBC News where I think there was about one segment produced a year, even though she was a contributor and she made over $500,000 a year.
It's a really good segment.
What?
It was a really good segment.
It was a powerful segment. I mean, Meghan McCain is a fucking useless child of privilege, but at least she goes on The View every day.
She punches the clock.
She makes an idiot of herself every day. She makes an incredible case against American oligarchy and inherited power every single day. Chelsea Clinton has done nothing except for co-sign her, mother's attacks on Medicare for All. Chelsea Clinton tweeted this back at Batia. Co-signed as an American, we should expect all elected officials, regardless of party, and all public figures to not to traffic in anti-Semitism. To which I say, I agree. And you owe Ilhan Omar an apology for trafficking in Islamophobia. And so maybe what people should do is they should take a fucking breath and leave a 19-year-old alone who will learn how to express herself better and ask themselves why the child of a fucking president who has his own record on the Middle East and Muslims, which we don't have time to get into, but suffice to say, to use the word that the kids prefer, is highly problematic. Maybe you should step back and ask, why is it that we are even hearing from her to begin with? And how dare she go out of her way to attack somebody who is a self-made United States Congresswoman who survived a refugee camp? Chelsea Clinton should apologize to Ilhan Omar and ask her for a life coaching session. And that's the Gulag. Okay.
Can I just observe something I don't think anybody's observed yet?
What is it?
If you look at the tweet that Chelsea sent here, it's replying to Bunger, Sargon, and Reagan Battalion, which means that this came across her feed through Reagan Battalion, which Reagan Battalion, if people don't know, is a really lame-ass like kind of never Trumper thing.
Wow.
But I'm looking for it. They tweeted something out that they had to delete because it was like sort of, I can't remember if it was like
co-signed as an American. What do you do? Ilhan Omar is a fucking American. She's a congresswoman. She's a refugee. I mean, get the fuck out of here.
And also, as someone who majored in Jewish history and is very aware of the persecution that the Jews have suffered, it's things like this that actually make it difficult to identify real anti-Semitism. Right. So I think as a Jew,
as a Jew,
it's really offensive, and it really traffics in the worst sort of political pandering, and she just really exemplifies the worst of the celebrity politician that we've had in the past, 250 years of American history.
Here's an example of a Reagan Battalion tweet that I think they deleted, but it says, okay, Act 1, all socialists in internment camps. That would reduce emissions by a lot. I think that was was talking about the Green New Deal. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing Chelsea Clinton is following.
Yeah, no, Chelsea
Thanks for your,
she's very woke.
And just like to jump off of what Daniel was saying, too, like when it comes to Chelsea Clinton, the people who defend Chelsea Clinton, and the arguments that they use are so outlandish. Like just in this most recent example of this person confronting her, the big controversy was that, well, Chelsea Clinton is pregnant, so like she can't be confronted on her politics because she's pregnant at the time.
Well, I'll say this just for the post game because I don't want to because I happen to be not friends, but like I know Zerlina Maxwell a bit. She's a nice person, blah blah blah, and I just don't want to. I really don't want to indulge in drama. I haven't talked to her for years, but we were part of the same social circle for a minute, like in 2013 or something. And she's a nice person, yada yada yada. But like, not only did she lie about Bernie's speech or make a insane error on national television. I noticed, she's on Twitter when people were responding to her. And my God, I mean, you'll get responded to if you have this platform, let alone you're on MSNBC. And she's like, oh, they're attacking me. Send me tweets of dogs. And it's like, you lied on television. What do you want people to do? And I'm the first one to say be less toxic. Obviously, anybody who was threatening her or saying something sexist or racist or whatever, of course, discard that. But I saw a lot of those replies. It was like, hey, you're going to correct yourself. You're going to apologize. I mean, I think specifically with the Clintons, there's something about their victim mentality and complete inability to take responsibility for anything that has been trickled down to the weird, uptight managerial class that follows her in a neurotic, terrifying way on social media.
And can I just say one quick thing? I think it also exemplifies how white people, particularly white upper-class people, expect to feel comfortable in every social situation. Like the assumption that Chelsea Clinton has is that when she enters a space, she belongs there. And I think I really think what is behind this is that a bunch of people looking at this don't appreciate that maybe they are not welcome in every social space at literally every moment. So, for example,
no, 100%.
And I think that's what it is. So, I think Chelsea Clinton did truck in Islamophobia, and it's understandable that a young Muslim woman, I think she was a Palestinian woman, in fact, doesn't necessarily want her at a moment a space of mourning at 100%. A particular moment. And so I think it just shows a profound lack of empathy, a total lack of empathy, and a total narcissism on behalf of Chelsea Clinton and, even more importantly, her defenders.
100%. Final call tonight. You're calling from an 818 area code, leaving a ton of people on the line. My apologies. We'll get to it later. Final call tonight, and then a couple of Discord questions that we got to get out of here. 818, are you there?
Hey, Mike. Can you hear me, Michael?
I can hear you, Matt. Do we have our drop ready? No, sorry. Oh, all right, Matt. We don't have our. All right, Dave. I'm sorry.
I'll make it very, very quick. Then I was with Dave. I'll make a quick joke. So when you guys bet that Dave Rubin will come out against gay marriage.
It's not that far off, actually. It's like, I actually think that it's like the new Patreon rules. Like, if you're already married, you should stay married, but shouldn't be able to get married anymore in the future. I was talking with Dennis Prager about that.
And I'll leave it at that. Since you
Dave,
guys are...
you're the best. All right, cool. Well, Dave was actually pretty cheerful tonight, so... All right, guys, just a couple of Discord questions, and then we will go. I know it's just too good. Let's see. No, Yang's human-centered capitalism, he mentions neither co-ops nor unions, although, of course, the latter isn't exactly capitalist, just shows how much of an idiot and grift he is. Yang would have signed the Asian American lawsuit against affirmative action if the right-wing grifter behind it was able to get to him earlier. These are more comments than questions. Can you ask the professors, what are some of the earliest examples of whitewashing in America's history books? Any good books on this? Could you just give book recommendations so we can...
Greatest whitewashing is probably the fact that Thomas Paine, for 200 years, was scorned so much by conservatives in every which way that they literally tried to drive him out of the historical record.
This is slight. I'm going to just truncate it into a question. Yes, I'm excited about Bernie's new hires, and of course, Bree. She's going to do a great job for him. Our regular, crew, Bree Joy, is Bernie's new press secretary.
I did know that.
Yes. Thames Darwin, point to Bessner. Michael Mann showed that democratized states tend to escalate violence in colonial territories to extrapolate this socialization in medicine in the context of the Cold War. I think this is point to Daniel. Also, Bismarck only adopted Social Security to undercut the SDP.
Yeah.
Right. I'm assuming you would think Bismarck. That.
Right.
Also, did Harvey know Hobsbawm?
Yes.
That's
very well.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you think of getting rid of the Electoral College?
Immediately.
Immediately. Agreed.
That's an easy one.
Let's see.
This
All right.
is like a quick
lightning round.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fascism bad, socialism good.
Question for Harvey and Daniel. Given the U.S. track record of using democracy promotion as a pretense to advance
I was
its
sent
own...
this before the evening.
Oh, you saw this one?
Yeah.
To advance its own economic political interests, should progressive foreign policy see existing institutions, the UN, IMF, as useful, or should new parallel institutions be built that don't hold the same reputation?
Yes, they should be built because I think essentially the international institutions created during and after World War II were essentially vehicles of U.S. primacy. If you're interested in learning more about this, read a recent essay that came out by a guy named Stephen Wertheim.
And Michael, when will TMBS start selling Lula T-shirts? Actually, really, honestly, quite soon. There is a mock-up that was made with TMBS and Lula. All right, guys. That's it for now. I appreciate you guys. You guys are amazing. I knew that this was going to be great. I want to
the Brain Trust today.
The Brain Trust is here. Thanks to everybody.
I'm impressed he knew it was Brain Trust. I'm impressed.
Was it Brains Trust or Brain?
No, I'm just the fact that you're referencing the Brains Trust is great.
Well, Matt's very historically oriented.
No, these guys always. I've so every time I'm
these
on,
guys
I
are.
tell you,
These guys are
marvels.
dude. I only run with the best. And
don't
speaking
forget
of which,
note our Twitter handle so they can.
Okay, yes. So tell it.
At Harvey JK.
D. Bessner.
D. Bessner. Of course, there'll be links to all of it in the show notes. Francesca Fiorentini. Then the week after, Malaika Jabali returns. Then we got Felix Biederman. Then we got Richard Wolff. And Illicit History is coming up with Nelson Deniz on Puerto Rico. Marissa Baradaran is on deck. And a bunch more. Zach Carter, Illicit History of Joe Biden. All right, everybody. Peace and love.
Joe Biden, Illicit History. I love it.